And the important part is talking through these pre-exit planning strategies ahead of the sale, because once you have that liquidity event as an entrepreneur, there's the press release that goes out, and then all of a sudden, your old friends from high school who forgot about you start coming out of the woodworks, and everyone wants to start talking to you. Everyone wants to interview you. Everyone wants you to invest in their deal. Life just becomes very, very noisy when you have a lot of money in your bank account. So the more planning you can do ahead of time while there's not as much noise is always works the best. Whereas if you're trying to scramble for doing some of this planning after the fact, A, some of this planning can't be done after the fact, but B, there's just so much more stress on your time. There's so many other people trying to get your time and your money. You just usually have analysis paralysis. You don't want to make any moves.
Yeah, well said. And when I think about it, the two riskiest time for an entrepreneur is startup, for obvious reasons, and 3 years post-exit. 3 years post-exit, I've seen millions of dollars squandered because the entrepreneur is on a high. The entrepreneur thinks all of a sudden, I'm so smart. Look how smart I am. And then they start putting money in all these startups and things that they think they're so smart and they've got figured out. And because they didn't have a plan, all these people are trying to get their money and they end up doing dumb things. And then years later, they look back and go, gosh, I was so dumb. All these investments I made that I was so smart that I lost all this money on. That's why having the plan before you have the money to invest to know where it's going, because once you have the money, it creates all these things that cloud your vision and make you susceptible to making big mistakes.
Yep, couldn't have said it better. So capital allocation decisions need to be made ahead of the transaction. You need to understand, what does your post-tax waterfall look like? There should be a waterfall that your fractional family office should build that shows the gross sales price. And then are you going to be rolling any equity into the new deal? How much is getting paid out in transaction fees, maybe phantom equity or profit interest to your team? And then how much in income taxes are you going to be paying? So then what's left for you? And then that needs to be tied into your financial plan so you understand from a cash flow perspective. If you're making, for example, $5 million of income or EBITDA, and if you're spending, most of that money and you're selling at 7, 8x, then you're going to have a math problem, right? And so you need to make sure that you really clearly visualize all of this before the deal.
And then also thinking ahead how this might impact family. How are you going to have people who are going to approach you and want money? What's going to happen? And I know I can think of one friend of mine, and he and his 2 business partners sold. It was a very public sale. So it was in the Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. And they sold to a Fortune 500 company for $250 million. Well, they had their kids who were in high school. They had never talked about how much money they had, how big the business was that they started, and they had never moved from their neighborhood. They kept driving their Hondas. They wanted the kids to go to the same, schools, and they didn't want to have them feel different or weird, so they never increased their lifestyle. Well, when that sale happened, guess what? Kids at the high school, somehow word got out, and they said their kids came home and they said, Mom and Dad, we need to have a conversation. And they said, what do you mean? You just sold your company for $250 million? And they had to have this conversation with their kids. So they were surprised because they didn't think about, they were so ingrained in getting this sale done, they didn't really think about the conversation they're going to have with their kids. And that's something you think about as an entrepreneur that may not be obvious, but think about family and how this is going to impact other people, because you may have a brother or a relative who all of a sudden wants money, and how are you going to handle that?